Picture this. It's a quiet Saturday evening, and you're settling into your favorite chair with a cup of tea. An old concert film is playing on the television, the kind you've seen a dozen times before. The lead singer is out front doing what lead singers do, and the camera keeps cutting to the guitarist and the drummer because that's where the flash is supposed to be. But then, something happens. The frontman steps forward, opens his mouth, and for about 90 seconds, the whole room belongs to him. Not the lights, not the guitar solo, him. And you find yourself leaning in, wondering how you ever missed it. Here's the thing folks don't talk about much. We've been trained for decades to believe the magic in a band lies in the side players, the hotshot guitarist, the wild drummer, the mysterious bassist in the back. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes the frontman, the one we assumed was just the pretty face holding the microphone, was actually the most gifted musician on that stage the whole time. We just weren't looking. Most of what you've read about great bands gets this part wrong. The music magazines loved a good guitar hero story, so that's the story they sold. By the end of this video, you'll have 10 clear examples that flip that idea on its head. Today I'll walk you through frontmen who, quietly or loudly, outplayed the very musicians everyone else was watching. And if you'd like the longer companion notes for this one, with a few extra names I couldn't fit in, the link is in the description. I won't bring it up again. Let's begin. Number 1 is Freddie Mercury of Queen.
Mama, just
Folks remember the voice, and rightly so, but Freddie was also a deeply trained pianist who wrote some of the band's most complicated music sitting at a keyboard, not a guitar. Brian May is a brilliant guitarist, no question. Yet when you listen closely to the piano work on Bohemian Rhapsody or the structure of Somebody to Love, you realize the architecture of those songs came from the man at the microphone. He wasn't just singing the melody, he had built the whole house around it, room by room, in his head before anyone else heard a note. Freddie studied at Ealing College of Art, but he was absorbing music theory at the same time. And by 1975, when Bohemian Rhapsody was recorded, he arrived at Rockfield Studio with the entire multi-section structure already mapped in his mind. The operatic middle passage alone involved over 180 separate vocal overdubs, and he directed every single one of them from the piano bench. Number 2 is Prince. Now, technically, Prince was often his own backup musician, because he played most of the instruments on his early records himself. But on stage, surrounded by some of the finest funk and rock players of his generation, he would routinely pick up a guitar mid-show and silence the room. The most famous example is a tribute performance of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, where Prince stood beside several legendary guitarists and, by the end, made every one of them look like they were politely waiting their turn. That performance was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony in March of 2004. And the other guitarists on that stage included Tom Petty, Steve Winwood, and Jeff Lynne himself, who appears later on this very list. Prince's extended solo at the close of that song is now studied in guitar programs at Berklee College of Music. He was the frontman. He was also the best musician on that stage. Number 3 is Stevie Wonder. By the time he was barely out of his teens, Stevie was playing piano, drums, harmonica, and synthesizer at a level most session musicians spend a lifetime chasing. His touring bands have always been packed with world-class players. Yet on any given night, the moment Stevie sits down at the keys or lifts that harmonica to his lips, the conversation is over. The harmonica solo on songs like For Once in My Life is the kind of playing that musicians study for years and still can't quite copy. When Stevie renegotiated his Motown contract in 1971 at the age of 21, one of his central demands was full creative control, meaning he would play what he wanted, when he wanted, and answer to no producer in the studio. Motown agreed, and the run of albums that followed, Talking Book, Inner Visions, Songs in the Key of Life, proved exactly why.
Powers, keep on lying.
Number 4 is Paul McCartney. Everyone remembers him as a singer and a songwriter, which is fair. But Paul is also one of the most melodic bass players in the history of popular music. On many Beatles recordings, while George Harrison was working out a guitar part and Ringo was holding the beat, it was Paul's bass line that was actually doing the heavy musical lifting. Listen to Something or Rain or Penny Lane. The bass is practically a second lead vocal. He outplayed his own band gently on song after song. Producer George Martin once noted in an interview that Paul would often come into Abbey Road studios with a bass part so fully formed and so melodically inventive that it changed the way the other instruments had to be arranged around it. On the 1966 recording of Rain, Paul played his bass line at a faster tempo and then slowed the tape down, creating a tone that no bassist had achieved before him. Number 5 is Lionel Richie.
Say you, say me.
People remember the smooth ballads and forget that Lionel started out as a saxophonist and a deeply skilled arranger with the Commodores. When that band took the stage in their early years, the funk grooves and the horn lines were tighter than almost anything else on the road, and a good part of that came from the man who would later be known mostly for love songs. The frontman wasn't just singing, he was, quietly, the music director.
You know just what to say, and you know just what to do.
Number 6 is Don Henley of the Eagles.
Last thing I remember, I was running for the door.
Now think about that for a moment. The Eagles had Glenn Frey, Joe Walsh, and a rotating cast of some of the best rock players in California. And yet Don Henley sang lead on many of their biggest songs while playing the drums. Singing lead while drumming is one of the hardest things a musician can do. Your hands and feet are doing one rhythm, your voice has to do another, and the two cannot collide. Don did it night after night on songs like Hotel California and One of These Nights and made it look easy. It is not easy. Drummer and vocal coach Zorro, who has worked with Lenny Kravitz and Bobby Brown, has said publicly that Don Henley's ability to phrase a lyric over a syncopated drum pattern without losing either the vocal breath support or the rhythmic pocket is something fewer than a handful of musicians in history have managed at that level of consistency.
Someone to be kind to in between the dark and the light.
Number 7 is Phil Collins.
If you're rapping up the word.
Before he was the bald fellow on the radio every 20 minutes in the 80s, Phil was the drummer for Genesis behind a singer named Peter Gabriel. When Gabriel left, the band needed a frontman, and Phil reluctantly stepped up. What folks sometimes forget is that Phil kept drumming, and his drumming is some of the most precise and inventive in rock. The famous drum break in the Air Tonight is exactly the kind of thing a side player would build a whole career on. Phil did it as the frontman, after he'd already sung the song. That break was recorded in 1981 using a combination of gated reverb processing pioneered by engineer Hugh Padgham, but the rhythmic idea behind it, the decision to strip the entire track bare and let silence do the work before the drums enter, that was Phil's instinct as a musician, not a producer's instruction. Number 8 is Jeff Lynne of the Electric Light Orchestra.
It's a living thing. It's a terror.
Lynne was the singer, the songwriter, the guitarist, the producer, and the arranger. ELO had a small army of string players and keyboardists, and every one of them sounded wonderful. But it was Jeff Lynne, sitting in the studio with a vision in his head, who layered all of it together. He outplayed his backup musicians not by being flashier, but by hearing the whole orchestra in his mind before any of them played a note. That kind of musicianship is invisible until you go looking for it. Number 9 is Levon Helm of the Band.
Take a load off Fanny.
Levon stood at center stage, sang lead on songs like The Weight and The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, and played the drums while he did it. The band was packed with extraordinary musicians, Robbie Robertson on guitar and Garth Hudson on the organ among them. And those men were giants. But when Levon opened his mouth and kept that beat going behind him, you understood that the soul of that group was sitting on the drum stool, singing. Martin Scorsese filmed the band's final concert, The Last Waltz, in November of 1976 at Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco, and every serious musician who has watched that film comes away saying the same thing. Levon Helm is the emotional center of every single frame he appears in, whether his sticks are moving or not. And before I give you number 10, a quick word. If you've enjoyed the trip so far, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and join our little community here on the channel. I read the comments, I answer what I can, and folks your age have shared some of the best music stories I've ever heard. You belong here.
Just 18, proud and brave, but a Yankee.
Number 10 is Bruce Springsteen. The E Street Band is famously stacked. Clarence Clemens on saxophone, Max Weinberg on drums, Stephen Van Zandt on guitar, the late Danny Federici on organ. These are some of the most beloved side musicians in rock. And yet, night after night, for decades, Bruce stood out front with a beat-up guitar and held a stadium of 50,000 people in his hand for 3.5 hours straight. His rhythm guitar playing is underrated because everyone is so busy listening to Clarence's saxophone. But the engine of that whole band, the strumming hand that drives everything forward, has always belonged to the frontman. In the summer of 1978, during the Darkness on the Edge of Town tour, Bruce played sets that regularly ran past 4 hours, and reviewers from the Los Angeles Times to the Boston Globe used the same word, relentless. That relentlessness came from his right hand on a Fender Telecaster, driving every song forward with a physical intensity that left professional guitarists in the audience quietly stunned. So, what does all of this add up to? It adds up to a simple lesson that the music business has spent a long time hiding from us. The most musical person on the stage is not always the one with the flashiest instrument or the longest solo. Sometimes it is the person at the microphone, holding the whole song together with both hands and a voice, doing 3 jobs at once while we admire the side players. There's no money in telling folks that the famous singer was also the best musician, because the whole industry is built on selling guitar heroes and drum gods. So you can be the one who finally listened closely and heard the truth. This week, pick one of these 10 names and put on an album you haven't played in years. Listen for the frontman's hands, not just the voice. This month, share what you hear with a grandchild or a friend who thinks all the old music sounds the same. You'll surprise them. Now, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments, tell me which frontman you always suspected was the best musician on that stage, the one nobody gave proper credit. And if you enjoyed this, you may like the next one I'm working on, about backup musicians who quietly carried bands whose names you'd recognize in a heartbeat. If this felt like sitting down with an old friend, do subscribe. Pour another cup, settle back, and I'll see you in the next one.
But was it just